Good day everyone. I have another Sony Mavica digital camera to show you today. This is the Sony Digital Mavica model MVC-FD90 from 2000. This was the high-end model in the 2000 line of Sony Mavica digital cameras. In this particular lineup of cameras, it started with the MVC-FD93, which was the VGA resolution model, the MVC-FD85, which was a 1.3 megapixel model. This unit, the FD90, which is a 1.6 megapixel camera, and then above this camera was the prosumer level 2 megapixel MVC-FD95. This is a very nice camera. It is my favorite out of all the Mavicas I've owned so far. This is the one that I use the most. This takes excellent pictures. Starting with the 2000 lineup of Mavicas, Sony finally sorted out whatever was going on with the Mavicas that caused them to often have kind of greenish tinted pictures, and they also sorted out what often caused the flash to totally wash out the picture when you use the flash. This camera takes excellent pictures. They are small, of course, because it's only 1.6 megapixel, but they are excellent quality. The color saturation, the tonality, the brightness, everything is just spot on with this camera. And honestly, if you were to look at two photos side by side, one from this and one from a modern digital camera, this thing actually rivals modern digital cameras for picture quality. I think it's a really excellent camera, and I take lots of pictures of it. I use this quite a bit. So for anyone who doesn't know, the Sony Mavica cameras were introduced in 1997, and they were the first really popular digital cameras. And the reason they were so popular is because of their storage medium. These cameras store their photos not on a memory card or on built-in memory, but a standard 3.5-inch floppy disk. Sony Mavica cameras have an ordinary 3.5-inch floppy disk drive, just like that found in a computer, and they store their photos on a 3.5-inch floppy disk. And you take your pictures, they're standard JPEG pictures, just like any digital camera. And when you want to view them on your computer, you just slip the disk into your computer and your pictures are there. No USB cable or anything required. No memory card that you need an adapter for. These were super simple to get your pictures onto the computer, and that made these massively, wildly popular. They were the first really popular digital cameras, and I own several of them. I've got one more after this that I still have to make a video of. Or actually 3 more now. I bought 2 more for myself on eBay for Christmas, even different models now. So now I've got 3 more after this that I'm going to make videos of. That'll be cool. Sony revamped the physical style of the Mavica cameras for the 2000 lineup, at least for most of the models. You can see that compared to the 1999 models, which I made a separate video about, this unit actually looks a bit more like a normal camera now. However, I don't find it as nice to hold in the hand as the 1999 units. The FD83 and the FD88 are the ones that I have that I made a video of, and I'm also currently trying to sell them. I found those cameras nicer to hold because they had a lot of flat surface area on them, particularly over here, that you could grab your left hand onto. You've got a lot of room to put your right hand, but your left hand, the lens is in the way because the lens has been moved to vertically the middle of the camera rather than up near the top now. So this camera is a little bit not as convenient to hold, but it is more like a modern digital camera now. So let's take a look at this thing. So this is a 1.6 megapixel camera. However, you can see it says interpolated. The actual image sensor is only 1.3 megapixels. It upscales the images to 1.6 megapixels. This was because basically at the time, in the early days of digital cameras, I'd say probably up until the mid or late 2000s, resolution sold a digital camera more than anything. That's the first thing people looked for when looking for a digital camera, was how many megapixels it was. And so unfortunately Sony, as well as many others, took the cheap way out. They'd build a camera around a cheaper, lower resolution CCD, and then use software interpolation to upscale the images to a larger size so as to better compete with the competition. Luckily, you can set this thing to take 1.3 megapixel pictures utilizing the full CCD and not upscaling them, so that's how I use this. I just use this as a 1.3 megapixel camera. So the FD88 that I showed in the other video, that was also a 1.3 megapixel camera. So it's the same resolution as that one, but this takes far better pictures because, of course, the FD88 being a 1999 model, it suffered from the kind of greenish tint that earlier Mavicas give pictures, and the flash deal and all that stuff. And then of course, you know, it's got the bugs that plague the FD88. This is overall a much, much nicer camera than the FD88. In my opinion, this unit, the FD90, is one of the best Mavicas to get. If you want to go on eBay and get a Mavica to try out and see what they're like, the FD90 would be at near the top of my list, or even at the top of my list of Mavicas to get. This is one of the best models to get. Just the best combination of features and picture quality. So let's take a look at what we got here. We'll start at the front. You've got your shutter button, of course. You've got a zoom control. This has an 8x optical zoom, very good zoom, or a 16x digital zoom. And there's your lens right there. There's the specs of the lens if you care. And this does have the original stickers that would have been put on it at the factory. There's your flash. That is a red LED that lights up when you take a picture, and it lights up to indicate when the timer is activated. I just realized I'm lying. That's the red LED. This would be a sensor either to help exposure or focus. Let's look at the sticker here. It's got stamina, up to 1600 shots or 2.5 hours of battery life on a single charge using the optional NP F550 battery. Yeah, those figures are probably under fantastic conditions. Now take a look at this. This is very interesting. Here's something that this camera introduced. It says higher capacity media memory stick compatible with an optional floppy disk adapter model MSAC-FD90. Indeed, for the first time in a Mavica, you could use a memory stick to store your photos instead of a floppy disk if you wanted to. But the question is, how? This doesn't have a memory stick slot on it. Well, Sony made an adapter in the shape of a floppy disk, and you stick your memory stick, you know, the old-fashioned Sony memory sticks that are like that long. You'd stick it in the floppy adapter, and then stick the adapter in the floppy drive, and the camera would use the floppy drive's read-write head to read and write data to and from the memory stick. This was a very kind of an odd solution at the time. I mean, they very well could have just stuck a memory stick slot on this thing, and they actually did. This camera's successor model, the MVC-FD90 did introduce a memory stick slot. But for this unit, you had this adapter, and you may be wondering, well, that's great, but what happened when you wanted to get your pictures onto the computer? Your computer, you know, in 2000, no computers had memory stick slots, maybe Sony Vaio laptops at the time. Well, unbelievably, this surprised even me, the floppy disk adapter will work in a computer. You installed a driver on your computer, and you could stick the adapter into your floppy drive on your computer, and your computer could read the memory stick. And this could be like a 4, 8, 16 megabyte memory stick, if not larger, and your computer could read it through the floppy drive. Very interesting. It worked, apparently. It wasn't great. Read-write times were extremely slow, the same speed as a an ordinary floppy disk, because that can't change. And the adapter required batteries, little watch batteries you had to put in it. And I've read that sometimes it wasn't very reliable and it would corrupt some pictures. It is a very interesting technology at the time. Early 2000s is when you got really weird stuff like this, a fusion of technologies. Very interesting. What do we got at the top here? Mpeg Movie. Like the FD83 and FD88, this camera can record video, and the video does have sound. It's 320 by 240 pixels of heavily compressed video of I think it's like 8 or 10 frames per second, I forget. Very, very, very poor quality video. You can fit up to 15 seconds onto a floppy, and we'll demonstrate that later. Or you could set an even lower quality. I think it was 160 by 118 pixels, and you could fit up to a minute of 160 by 118 video on a floppy with sound. But it was quite a novelty for the time. And this does have the 4X floppy disk drive, so the drive spins the floppy disk at 4 times the normal floppy disk speed. I think a 3.5-inch floppy spins at 250 RPM, so that'd be 1,000 RPM, way faster than a floppy disk was ever designed to mechanically withstand. But whatever drives Sony used in these, I doubt they were Sony drives, because I know the original Mavicas that had just the single-speed drive, Sony actually outsourced the drives to Mitsumi, which is, I find super odd, because Sony made their own floppy disk drives, but they decided to contract Mitsumi to make the floppy drives for the first Mavicas. So I would assume these are not Sony drives, or they could be Sony drives. I mean, these are the only things I've ever heard of that have a 4X floppy disk drive in them. But whoever made the drive, really well designed drive, they've been mechanically designed in such a way that somehow the disk is able to spin at 4 times the normal speed. But it's extremely quiet. You hardly hear anything, just a quiet whirring sound. But I think a different manufacturer probably provided the drive for this camera than for the FD83 and 88, which also had 4X drives, because it sounds slightly different. Another sticker, it says interpolated 1.6 megapixel images, 1472 by 1104 is the resolution, precision digital 16x zoom. And there's your microphone for the video recording, standard mono microphone. And this camera also has the mode where you can take a picture and attach a 5-second audio clip to the picture, which it just makes into a 5-second long Mpeg video with that still image and the audio clip. A manual focus ring, it's made of metal, it feels quite nice to use. Interestingly, the FD92, this camera's successor model, ditched the manual focus ring. The FD92, you could not manually focus it. It just had a range of a few selectable focus ranges, and that was the best you got. I find it was with the 2001 Mavicas that Sony started, their usual trick they do when they begin to wind down a product line. They start removing features and just making them really not worth getting anymore. The 2000 model Mavicas were the last really nice Mavicas that were fully featured. So yes, this does have the manual focus. And there's your manual focus switch if you want it. Very nice feature the 2000 model Mavicas introduced. You could charge them. You didn't need a separate charger to stick the battery in it anymore. You just plugged your charger in, and this uses the standard garden variety Sony model AC-L10 AC adapter charger. Same adapter used on Handycams for years. In fact, there might still be Sony equipment using this charger. I don't know. But yeah, very common charger. No problem sourcing a charger to charge one of these if you have one. There's an AV out jack to connect to a television to view your photos and videos on a TV. Oh, and a jack for a powered flash, a remote flash, which is very nice. I've just noticed that, but it's very odd because there's no place to stick a flash on here. I guess it'd have to be a handheld one or a tripod mounted one or something. Going around the back, this has a full range speaker on it right here, so you have a volume control to adjust the volume when you're listening to videos in the playback mode. You can turn the display backlight on or off, and the reason you might want to turn it off is because there's this little window right here, so when you're outside in the sun shines out through this window and it lights up the display. So you can turn the backlight off, have the display lit with sun, you're able to see the display, and it saves battery life. But as I've mentioned before, I found that in practice it actually doesn't work that well, because if sun's hitting this window, it's probably hitting the display itself at the same time, and that completely washes it out. If you had like a lens hood around here, then it would actually work quite well. But in normal use in practice, it's not that great. Your mode switch: playback to view your pictures, still picture mode, and video recording mode. Power indicator / charging light, lights up yellow when it's charging, goes out when you're fully charged. Your power switch to eject the floppy disk, like that. Turn your flash on or off, or enable the red eye reduction mode. Macro mode. Program AE, so your standard, sports, landscape, beach, and snow, that just presets for the exposure and stuff. And turn your display indicators on and off, and a 4-way navigation to navigate the menu, and it pushes in to select things as well. On the other side, your floppy disk drive. You've got lugs here to attach a neck strap. On the bottom, the battery compartment. This camera uses the standard Sony Lithium L series battery, extremely common and easy and cheap to get battery. Sony still makes it today. Used Sony batteries are very cheap to find on eBay. You can buy new generic batteries for cheap on eBay, but beware, starting with the 2000 model Mavicas, Sony implemented a feature in which the camera checks to see if the battery has functioning infolium circuitry. If it does not, the camera will refuse to power on. It'll turn on, give you an error, turn back off, which is too bad. Some generic batteries, the really cheap, crappy ones, they may otherwise work, but they don't provide the camera with infolium telemetry, and so the camera will not turn on without it. And even some genuine Sony batteries, when they get old and worn out, I have a couple of Sony batteries that still work, but they don't provide infolium telemetry anymore. Stick one in this camera, won't work. Very stupid. I don't get why, because the older Mavicas don't care if the battery has working infolium circuitry or not. Nor does my High 8 Handycam. I'm running a generic battery with non-functional infolium circuitry in this camcorder right now, and it works just fine. And it's actually one of my better batteries. It runs this camcorder for hours. But yeah, unfortunately, you need to use a battery that has functional infolium circuitry, or this camera will refuse to power on. Too bad. So that limits your options, and it introduces a bit of risk if you're buying generic batteries or used Sony batteries. Too bad. Camera pops out, or battery pops out rather. I gotta put it back in quickly. This camera has a built-in rechargeable clock battery, and it's not very good. It generally only lasts for seconds after you take the main battery out before it loses the time and date. You get a tripod mount. There's the date code, 2000, first quarter of 2000. Made in Japan. Very, very nice. And there's your lot. So let's turn this on. Put it in the still picture mode. Yes, it is. When I turn this on, you will hear the floppy drive check the disk. I'm not sure if you can even hear that. Very, very quiet. You can see it did lose the time and date because of the few seconds I had the battery out, so I'm going to set that. Today is December 8th, 2016, and it's currently 12. Oh my gosh, it's midnight already? Holy cow. Alright, it's 12:13 a.m. And there, we are working here. So let me turn my exposure down so you can see the display showing we got 213 minutes. There's our resolution marker. I have this set to the 1.3 megapixel mode, which is a 1280 by 960 resolution, I think. Here's our indicator illustrating how much disk space is used on the floppy and how many pictures we've taken. And our menu bar. So if we go to through the menus, there we can set a 10-second timer if we want. This camera, well, all the Mavica cameras are kind of annoying with their timer. When you turn them on, they're only good for that one picture, and then you got to turn it on again if you want to take another picture using the timer. It doesn't stay on by itself. We have our usual effects. Oh, you can set a date and time marker. You know, it puts a marker on the corner of the photos you take with the date and time. Picture effects, you get negative, sepia, black and white, solarize. Oops. It's hard to do. Oh, this camera's heavy. So our record mode, you have the normal mode, you have an email mode, which a picture you take with the email mode takes not only a normal size picture, but it takes a second copy of that picture that's 320 by 240 in size to make it very small for emails. You have a voice mode, that's where it takes a still image and allows you to record 5 seconds of audio, which it compiles into a 5-second long Mpeg video file. And you have a mode called text, and that was new for these cameras on this model. I really don't understand the point of it. It takes a black and white image, to my recollection. Yeah, it takes a black and white image, and I guess it's optimized for taking a picture of like a page of text. But I don't know under what circumstances you'd use that. Image size. You can take a VGA resolution image, an XGA resolution image, a 3:2 aspect ratio 1280 pixel wide image, the standard 1.3 megapixel size, or the upscaled interpolated 1.6 megapixel size. You do not get an option for standard or fine quality mode. That was a first for the Mavicas on the 2000 Model 1. Sony eliminated the fine or standard quality mode. This camera and its brethren, aside from the VGA resolution unit, the FD73, starting with the 2000 model Mavicas, they only take pictures in the equivalent of the standard quality mode, which is too bad. And I know why they did this. They did this because the higher resolution of the images made it so very few images could fit on a floppy now, and so I guess Sony saw no use of putting a mode on the camera such that you could only fit like 2 photos on a floppy. In the 1.6 megapixel mode, this camera can fit 4 photos, or actually I think it can fit 5 photos on a disc. In the 1.3 megapixel mode, it can fit 6 to a disc. It can fit 8 or 10 in the XGA resolution mode, and it can fit about 20 or 25 in the VGA resolution mode. But yeah, too bad they eliminated the fine quality mode. I haven't read in the manual, but it's possible. I think it's possible that when you use the memory stick adapter, that enables the fine quality mode, but I'm not sure about that. File number. You have series or normal. With normal, every time you remove the floppy, it resets the file counter, so the file names of the pictures start at 001, or with series, it keeps going forever, unless the clock battery dies, which resets it, which happened in this case. Disk tool. You can copy the entire contents of a floppy to another floppy, or you can format the disk. Camera menu. You can set the exposure from +2 to -2 EV. Flash level, low, normal, or high. So it's not an intelligently variable flash. It just chooses one of the whatever of the 3 brightness intensity levels you choose. White balance. You do get manual white balance. You can set the sharpness to artificially soften or sharpen the picture. It makes a little bit of a difference, but I see no use for it as I use this thing. And you can eliminate the digital zoom if you don't want to use it, which I have. LCD brightness, turn beep on or off, or you can turn the beeps off, but just use the shutter noise. Set the time and date, set the language, and NTSC or PAL for the video output. And that's your lot in the still picture mode. Let's go to the movie mode. So we're now in the movie mode. You get an indicator for the resolution of the video, either 320 by 240 or 160 by 118. So we've got all our same picture effects. Record time. So you can choose for videos to be either 5, 10, or 15 seconds long. If you choose less than 15 seconds, or if you use the 160 by 118 resolution mode, you can fit multiple clips onto a floppy. But these are only the minimum lengths that the video clips have to be. If I, for example, choose the 5-second mode and I start recording a video, I can keep the shutter button held down for longer than 5 seconds, and it will record a clip for however long you keep the shutter button held down up until the disc is full. Image size, oh excuse me, it's 160 by 112, not 118. But there's your 2 video resolutions, file number, disk tool, white balance and exposure, and that's your lot. If we go to the play mode, we've taken no pictures. So you can protect an image, keep it from being deleted. You can set a print mark, which I explained in the video of the FD83 and FD88. Print mark was like an old, well, it's a standard that still exists, but it was invented like 15 years ago. Nobody ever made use of it. It's just a standardized way for, like if I take a picture and I set this so-called print mark and I input the picture into like one of those Kodak printing kiosks at a supermarket or whatever, the kiosk should in theory recognize that print mark, and it automatically queues up that image to be printed. You can play a slideshow of your images on the disc. Disk tool. Resize. I haven't actually used that before. We'll have to see what that does. Maybe that just lets you like resize a picture. Like if I take a 1.3 megapixel picture, I can resize it to VGA or XGA resolution. Or I can copy a individual picture to another disk. And that's your lot there. So let's go back into the picture mode. I will take a picture, and you can hear what the floppy drive sounds like. So you can see that, or hear rather, that the floppy disk sounds a bit different. The spindle motor has a bit of a different pitch to it. So I have reason to believe that the drives in the 2000 model and beyond Mavicas were sourced by a different manufacturer than the 1999 units with 4X drives. Just take a selfie here. I have no idea how good or bad I look. That came out pretty well. So if we go into the play mode, there's our picture. And of course, I'm going to provide a link in the description of an album of test images that I've taken with this camera that you can look at. I forget if I've mentioned already. I said this is the Mavica that I use the most. This is actually now the digital camera that I use the most, more than my my Canon, my modern Canon digital camera. I use this for general use now. And the vast majority of the selfies that I put on my two Instagram accounts, the Maritime Man and Becoming.me.0, and by that metric, most of the images I put on Becoming.me.0 are taken with this camera, just because it does such a great job and it's fun to use and everything, because floppy disks. So there's our picture that we just took, and yeah, that looks excellent. I think that picture will look very good when we look at it, or when you look at it in the Imager album that I'll link to in the description. We can go to the next picture here. There's the first picture we took, which didn't come out well. So I can go to the File menu and go to Slideshow and set the interval, whether it repeats, and it'll just... It's odd how this camera works. This camera has enough memory to hold an entire floppy disk's worth of contents, but when you do the slideshow, it loads each picture individually over and over and over, running the floppy drive over and over, which isn't great for the disk or the drive. Sony ought to have programmed this so it just loaded all the pictures into memory and then just read them from memory over and over. But I'll start the slideshow. So that's how that works. So I'll stop that. Now let's see what this resize feature does. Resize. Okay, yeah, you can just choose what size you want. Now this is a 1280 by 960 image. Will it actually let me upscale it? There's the 1280. Looks like it might have created a new image. Yeah, there it is. Huh, how about that? Just simply creates a new copy of the image. I don't see a point to upscaling an image, because that doesn't improve the quality in any way, but I do find it quite nice how if you wanted to, you could create a smaller copy of an image for any reason that you need a smaller image, either emailing or anything like that. So very, very neat functionality. I don't think the 1999 units had that. And I say now, let's go into the movie mode and actually take a video test of it. I will record 2 videos with this camera, one at each resolution, and throw them into this video. So here are test videos from this camera, starting first with the 320 by 240 mode, and then next will be the 116 or 120 by 112 mode. So here's the video being recorded in the 320 by 240 mode. The zoom is functional, and it's very heavily compressed. And with a new floppy disk inserted, this is the 160 by 112 resolution mode. You can fit up to about a minute of video on one floppy. When taking video, the camera records the entire video to memory first, and then writes it to the disk when the clip is finished. And there's the 2 discs we've used already, this with the 2, or 3 rather, photos we've taken, this with the 320 by 240 resolution video. And once again, of course, the zoom is functional. And there is autofocus. If we go into the play mode and then turn the camera on, it'll have to read back the entire video from the disc. So let's see that. And there it is, and the video is ready to play, and we can watch and listen to the video on the camera. So let's do that. And with the new floppy disk inserted, this is the 160 by 112 resolution mode. You can fit up, and we can pause it midway through, to about a minute of video on one floppy. When taking video, the camera records the entire video to memory first, and then writes it to the disc when the clip is finished. Very good speaker on this thing. So really, that's about all there is to show of the Sony Digital Mavica model MVC-FD90 from 2000. It's a very, very nice early digital camera. Takes excellent pictures. This is one of the first Mavicas that took really great pictures after Sony sorted out some of the oddities that the earlier Mavicas had that impacted photo quality. This takes really great pictures. I actually use this for actual picture taking. It's really fun to use because, you know, it takes floppy disks. And it just because where it's so old and everything, it's really fun to use. But it's very rewarding to use because the photos are such excellent quality, and it's actually really convenient to use because the photos are quite small. The 1.3 megapixel images are like 210 kilobytes in size. That's very convenient. You know, it doesn't take long to upload them. You know, if I'm posting a photo on Facebook or Instagram or emailing it to someone, it's quite nice. But yeah, this is just overall an excellent all-around camera, even today. And if you want a Mavica to play around with, this would be near the top of the list of Mavicas that I would recommend. Just because it takes good photo quality and, you know, reasonably high-resolution pictures. And it was before Sony started cheapening out the Mavicas. So it's got a decent zoom, an 8x zoom, the manual focus wheel, the DC input jack, which is very nice. Not all the Mavicas had that, only the later ones. And the 4x drive and the video mode if you want to play around with that. And yeah, it's just very nice to use. So I'm very happy to have this camera. I think it's great, a great collection piece and just a great overall camera to use. And again, there is a link in the description to an album on Imager of test photos from this camera. Some of the photos are ones I've posted on Instagram, just selfies I've taken with this thing, because I use this thing for pretty much all the selfies I take for Instagram. And there are other photos as well, stuff that I haven't, just general stuff that I don't put on the internet. So click that link and take a look at just how wonderful the pictures from this camera really are. So that's all for this thing. I hope you have enjoyed watching. Thank you so much for watching. And I will see you guys later.